Hello and welcome to a very special edition of SpyHards podcast. I'm Agent Scott.
And I'm Cam the Provocateur.
And, well, I think before maybe we talk about what we're doing this week, one of the things I wanted to do is say thank you to each and every one of you. We have done 100 full episode reviews now, a bunch of interviews as well along the way, a ton of fun. We just want to thank you all for joining us on this journey.
You've been with us through the Bonds, the Bournes, and the Condor Mans, and the House on 92nd Streets, the British Agents, all across the board. And we want to, express our thanks that when we launched this podcast, we knew that people would be excited to hear us talk about Bond and, the big franchise stuff. But it's been very encouraging just throughout this crazy journey that you guys have been there for like some of our really crazy offshoot things. Springfield Rifle did pretty well. So just want to express my thanks to all of you for, look, as a film geek, I like digging into stuff that people don't necessarily know about. And it's been very encouraging to see that people have responded to those episodes.
Yeah, I mean, those who know about the genesis of SpyHards, at one time we were thinking about doing a James Bond podcast. And I think in 2-year retrospect, I'm very glad that we didn't. Much love to everyone who talks about James Bond every week. They're all part of the Spy family to me, but I relish the opportunity to switch from different film to different film every week and not talk about the man in the tuxedo. Now, not to mention, we do talk about him every couple of months, but it's so refreshing to then hop on a surfboard with Big Jim McLean.
Or strum a guitar with Roy Orbison.
Yeah, it's these moments that they become, like, I don't want to say a meme, because between two people, is it really a meme?
Sure.
But legendary on the podcast as well. We often mention these weird flights of fancy more than we mention, say, the Bourne Legacy.
Right. I mean, once you've tackled Dr. Goldfoot, you're never the same afterwards.
No, I'm still plunging off that cliff in San Francisco and getting blown up by those boats. I will never leave that moment in my head. But also, Cam, I want to thank you. It's a little bit weird to thank your co-host, but you've been editing this show for the last 2 years, and it's a lot of work. It's a lot of hours of your week that you put into making me sound less like a fool. So I just want to thank you.
And right back at you for all of the interview booking you do, because I think that's been a big feature of the show that people have really enjoyed. And we've heard a lot of great response, especially just recently with the Barbara Carrera episode. And that is all on you, tracking those people down like a true spy master.
Well, I am the Spy Master. Maybe I should assume that title now instead of Agent Scott. It's Spy Master Scott. Oh, it's even alliteration there. I love it.
And my designation will just backslide into pedestrian.
Cam the editor. Oh.
Yeah.
And also a thank you to everyone who's been a guest on the show along the way. Also thank you, of course, to all people who've agreed to be interviews, and we've got a lot more in the bag. There's one, a big one we're saving for next week that we'll announce at the end of the show, but we've got a few more that are coming in the next few months that we've already recorded, and thank you to them. And thank you to all the guests that have joined the show, from our roundtable specials to our declassified episodes to just our usual reviews. Thank you for everyone that's jumped on the pod and helped us dissect spy movies.
Yeah, and really got into the spirit of the show.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you have to take it a little less seriously to really enjoy SpyHards. We're not hoity-toity podcasters here.
No, that is true. We are definitely not in the sophisticated brackets.
This is lowbrow podcasting right here, folks, and I'm all about it.
That's right.
But speaking of high bars, I guess we should talk about what we're doing this week, Cam.
Yes, we are knocking on heaven's door. We are looking at the NOC List. Scott is shaking his head. This is no way to celebrate 100 episodes. We are going to look at the NOC List. We have, over the past 100 episodes, brought a lot of films into our, pantheon of all-time spy films, and we are going to determine through a knockout bracket which is the king of them all or queen of them all, which is the film that reigns supreme over the group, and we're going to basically champion that winner, and then when we have the next 100, we'll be able to do the same thing. We can kind of decide what are the greatest films on the NOC List, because some films are on there because we think they're important for you to see and they add to the conversation. But what are the ones, what truly is the best spy film on the NOC List? And we're going to determine that today.
Yeah, I mean, the mission statement is to make the list of the best spy movies of all time. But then there has to be a champion of champions, surely. There has to be someone at the top of that pantheon, the top of the hill, the cream of the crop, as it were. And so that's what we're going to do. And as Cam said, when we do the next 100, we'll have 2 champions. And eventually when we get to the end, we'll have a bunch of champions, I imagine, because our film list is several hundred long at this point now. We'll have several champions that will have to face off against each other to crown the ultimate winner of the best spy movie of all time, as decided by 2 idiots.
I look forward to the day when we're just tackling the dregs of the genre and we do like 100 episodes of just like the equivalents of British Agent. It's like, well, it's been 100 episodes and no films made the NOC list this year.
Well, it's actually really interesting. If you look at like the last 100 episodes, I think we started off really hot and then we realized that exact problem, that if we didn't talk about some of the dregs, as it were, the my favorite spy of it all, then we would be left with them all at the end. And so, looking at the start, you started off with things like GoldenEye, North by Northwest, Ipcress File, Doctor No, within the first 20 episodes.
Man from U.N.C.L.E. Yeah.
Yeah, Man from U.N.C.L.E. Well, that didn't make the NOC list, but
No.
but in the last I think in the last 2 months we haven't had one single entry.
No. That is true. I think the last one was Ghost in the Shell, the anime film. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think we're more aware of it now, and that's why you get more of a mix every week. And speaking of Ghost in the Shell, to make these brackets work, there are currently 27 films on the NOC list, but to make the mathematics behind these brackets work, we had to eliminate 3 at the start. And I think we can just go through them very quickly and our reasons behind it. The 3 that we took out were 1, Ghost in the Shell. For me personally, it's a great film that everyone should check out. It's spy adjacent, but I'm not sure it's really a spy film too much. And I think I even said so in the episode.
Yeah, that's how I could justify this one, in that it did feel a little more spy adjacent. Yes, they work for a top secret agency, but it doesn't really fall within what we expect of from a spy film. So, great film, check it out, but yes, didn't make the brackets.
The next one was Hannah, the Saoirse Ronan film, a very early entry for us on the show, on the NOC list. The reason we chose this one is actually just due to the film's popularity or lack thereof, as it were. I mean, we both really love the film, but it's just not an episode that people have really tuned back into. And that tells us a little bit that there isn't that much interest in the film. So maybe we were wrong about this one. I don't know. I still love the film and I think people should watch it, but it's clearly not a popular one out there in the world. So I think that's one of the reasons we took that one away. And then the last one, it was actually between 2 films and we tossed a coin to pick it. So it was actually between my choice, which was Our Man Flint, where we were arguing at length on the episode whether to put it on the NOC list or not. It ended up making the NOC list. Or Spy Kids. And again, I argued that one onto the NOC list. I think actually both of those films I argued onto the NOC list. And I think, and in the end, Spy Kids won, so they're staying in the brackets.
Yeah, I mean, with the case with Hannah, that's a movie I like a lot, and I wish people would check out. But, like, I also was able with that one to say, look, Hannah is not beating Goldfinger or something like that. Like, the chances of Hannah winning is just slim to none. So I just felt like, okay, we can just dismiss this one out of the gate because it's not going to proceed too far into the, the tournament. But like the Our Man Flint going, this was one, again, like I could kind of justify because we really did rack our brains over Spy Kids and Our Man Flint in the actual episodes, whereas most of the other ones on the list were pretty clear-cut favorites. There's some controversial ones, but I felt like those 2 of the group were the ones we were the most undecided on when it came to the end, where we were spending like 5 minutes trying to even determine whether they belong there.
Absolutely. So we've limited it down to 24, and then I've made a bracket out of that, randomized everything several times over to make sure it's just a completely random set of brackets. And what we'll do, we'll try and keep you up to speed as we go along. I may even try and make a graphic and get that sent over to Cam at some point so we can publish it online so you can see what it looks like in the end. But we'll try and keep you up to speed as we go. But we're going to pick 2 films and then discuss whether it makes the next round until we get down to a first, second, and third place, basically.
Right.
Right, well, this is round 1, so we've got 24 films and we're going to break it down to 12 films. So the first set of films are going up against each other. are The Bourne Supremacy and You Only Live Twice.
Okay, so Born Supremacy was a real surprise for me. It's a movie I enjoyed back when I saw it the first time, but when we revisited it with License to Queer on that episode, David Lowbridge Ellis, I just fell in love with the Born Supremacy and have watched it a few times since. I voted against You Only Live Twice, the 1967 Bond film. This is like one of my least favorite Sean Connerys, so this is a real easy one for me. What about you?
I was the defender along with our guest Chris Hewitt on that episode for You Only Live Twice. It was still one of our most popular episodes. I still really like You Only Live Twice, and I feel it's a tough one. But I think The Bourne Supremacy is the easy win in this one. It's just a better film.
Oh yeah, and we have some. I've seen obviously the categories we're going to be tackling, the individual brackets. We have some real hair pullers, like some real nail biters. There's a lot of things being pulled. I don't know what's going on here, but
it's like torture, just like this podcast.
Yeah, exactly. But like I think this bracket's pretty easy to settle. I know that like You Only Live Twice. There's a lot of iconic stuff with the Blofeld reveal, the volcano, but just as a 2-hour story, like it's paced questionably.
Oh no, stop there, Cam. You're a defender of Thunderball to the end of time, and you're going to question the pace of You Only Live Twice. Check yourself, young man. What are you talking about?
Yeah, you got me there. Okay, that's fair. But like I don't know. To me, this is not an inspired Connery one, whereas there are several that are top level, like all-time masterpieces.
The way I reason this one out is quite simple. The Bourne Supremacy for me is the best of the Bourne films. It's the only one to make the NOC list.
Yeah.
And it's better than many Bond films, including this one. So it's an easy one for me. Like there's other Bond films I think that might give Supremacy a run for its money. It's just not You Only Live Twice.
Nope.
All right, so Bourne Supremacy is moving on to the next round. The next bracket is our first ever episode. Our first ever entry onto the NOC list.
Uh-oh.
GoldenEye.
Uh-huh.
Versus Alfred Hitchcock's Notorious.
This is the brutality I was hinting at when we were...
Yeah. It gets much worse. It's horrible. It's the best of the best. It's what we're doing here. You went first on the last one, so I'll go first on this one.
Yeah.
GoldenEye... I'll tell you something. I will stick on Notorious a lot. It's actually one of the films I've discovered through this podcast that I really love.
Yeah,
I really love this film. I've got it on like Blu-ray now. It's gorgeous. It's such a great film. But I think GoldenEye is also a great film and has all the added, the fact that it rebirthed the entire Bond genre in a way. Like it brought that flame back to Bond. It brought me to Bond. It's such an important film for so many reasons that I don't see how it couldn't go through to the next round.
This is brutal. The thing about Notorious is, I think in terms of storytelling, I would say Notorious is like top tier. Like I don't know that there's much to comparison. Ingrid Bergman's performance in this movie, Claude Rains, just all-timer stuff going on. And we did a commentary for this one on the Patreon, which I enjoyed doing a lot. We
did both.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, we did do GoldenEye. So like this is to me very difficult. GoldenEye, it just was this wave. Like if you're gonna track the evolution of Bond, if I were writing a book, The Evolution of Bond, I would have GoldenEye as one of the most important films, and not just like because of the film itself, but also because of the 64 video game and everything like that. That just brought that entire franchise screaming back after License to Kill's underperformance. Oh my God, it's like, am I talking about the quality of the film or kind of the importance of the film? Because I think Notorious, while a classic, I don't know that it holds sort of the sway over like pop culture or even the film world the way that some of Alfred Hitchcock's other films do. Like I don't think when we're talking about Hitchcock, people immediately go to Notorious. They go Psycho, Rear Window, Vertigo, stuff like that. They don't really go to Notorious. This is brutal. Because like the snob in me is like Notorious all the way, but we have to maybe just tell the listeners what happens if we split on this.
I don't think we've ever decided that, Cam.
Well, I think what we do is the random number generator or flip a coin. Now, I'm not saying that I'm going to fall on the flip of a coin on this one. I think I can justify GoldenEye. And I think it's because when I look at what GoldenEye has accomplished, it's exceedingly strong. Like, I've seen the download numbers, and I've seen how many people have come to this podcast through GoldenEye. And so, like, there's another Hitchcock I will fight way harder for. But, like, Notorious is... I think I will surrender that one for GoldenEye, because I think it's... If I'm looking at the Bonds, there's a lot of Bonds I love, but I wouldn't necessarily fight for them being kept right to the bitter end. So GoldenEye is one I kind of think I would. So I think let's come down on GoldenEye on that one, but I won't feel good about it. I won't be sleeping tonight, Scott.
It's definitely a tough choice between the two. I immediately knew what I was going for when I saw it, unfortunately. But I agree with the same point that there's other Alfred Hitchcock films I would probably go to bat before this.
Yeah. I mean, one in these brackets we'll be talking about.
Well, there's a couple coming up, funnily enough. So there you go. GoldenEye is beating Notorious and moving on to the next round. Next up, we have The Parallax View versus Alfred Hitchcock's North by Northwest.
This one's actually pretty easy for me. I loved doing The Parallax View, a movie that I'd enjoyed the first time and really rediscovered, where I just found so much more to appreciate with that film. When we talked about Spy Adjacent for Ghost in the Shell, I suppose in some ways that's what The Parallax View kind of feels like, even though like I do think the sense of like this corporation engaging in all these espionage acts counts it as a spy film, just not a traditional spy film, because you have obviously Warren Beatty playing a journalist uncovering this conspiracy. But as much as like the set pieces in that are incredible, especially at the end with the dude in the runaway cart, I mean, North by Northwest, I mean, that sets the bar. That influences From Russia with Love. That is one of the most important spy films of all time, I think, and one of Alfred Hitchcock's best. Yeah,
I'm not going to telegraph how I think about North by Northwest and how it might do in the rest of this contest, but you're right. It's if someone asks you what the best spy film of all time is, and you had to pick one, you'd be hard pressed not to say North by Northwest.
Condor Man.
Well, okay. The most fun spy movie of all time, Condor Man, of course. But yeah, there's so many iconic moments in North by Northwest that have been, not just in From Russia with Love, but all kinds of films have riffed off of it. That whole wrong man in the wrong place. And it felt like it's Alfred Hitchcock perfecting his own formula.
And like with Notorious, the reason also that I can put it out in favor of GoldenEye is because like I do think the movies that really endure in terms of like grabbing people long term are the ones that entertain them. And I know that sounds crazy, but when you look at stuff like The Godfather, Citizen Kane, Casablanca, these are really, really entertaining movies. And I think like GoldenEye works so well because it's so entertaining on top of all the things it brings to that franchise. Whereas like, I don't know that like a lot of people would describe Notorious as full on entertaining.
Notorious to me feels like the spy film fans' spy film.
Yeah, and I would say like North by Northwest is full-on entertainment. And that's kind of the difference.
But approachable, like a mass market spy film in a sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was an easy one for me. I think North by Northwest. Are you in agreement on that one?
Yeah, easily.
Okay. So Parallax View is not going through. North by Northwest is into the next round. Speaking of Alfred Hitchcock, he's back again. I probably should have moved some of these around, but I didn't want. It was a random choice generator. I couldn't edit it. It was completely done by a computer. We have. Oh, this is horrible.
Was it like the Parallax View brainwashing, where it's like obey, obey, obey?
Yes, exactly. I wish I wore my hat. The 39 Steps versus On Her Majesty's Secret Service.
Oh my God. Okay. Well, in terms of the Bond films we've covered on the podcast, On Her Majesty's is pretty much the best. So that's difficult.
That's interesting. So you would say of all the ones we've covered so far in terms of Bond, On Her Majesty's is the winner.
I think. Well, I could make arguments.
You take it over GoldenEye, over Goldfinger.
I could make arguments. I think for Goldfinger, but they would have more to do within like cultural impact and things like that. But I tend to regard On Her Majesty's as being one of the all-time great Bond films. So that's difficult. But 39 Steps was such a joy. So, like that falls into that entertainment, where it's like it's a great spy story. Like you don't know where it's going to go. It surprises you at every turn, but it also is just hugely entertaining and fun. Where are you thinking on this one?
I'm going to buck the trend of everyone listening at home. I imagine there's a lot of people listening going, "On Her Majesty's, you blimmin' idiots. What are you doing?" I'm going to go for the 39 Steps.
Oh, okay.
I just had so much fun with that film. It's such an easy watch. It's entertaining. Everyone is well cast, and the acting is phenomenal. The direction's terrific. On Her Majesty's does everything right except for George Lazenby.
Sure.
I said it in the episode. I stick to it. I wish there'd been someone else in that film. I love it. It's the most cinematic of Bond films ever made. The stuff where they're attacking Piz Gloria on the helicopters. I saw it on the big screen this year. Absolutely gorgeous. I could watch it all day, but I just can't get past Lazenby's performances. And he's a lovely guy. He's a terrific bloke, but should he have been Bond? I'm not sure. And I said that on the episode, and I still stick to it. So if I'm going to pick between two potentially perfect films, I'm going to go with the one that has more ticks than, crosses.
I think we may have a split because I think I'm going to have to go for On Her Majesty's because when I look at 39 Steps, like just such a delightful film. But like I think Alfred Hitchcock refined his abilities and we get future spy films that he created that jump off of what that movie's doing and just take it to an even more impressive level. Whereas when I look at On Her Majesty's, Peter Hunt's direction of that is a beautiful movie. I think it's just one of the best examinations of the Bond character we get in the franchise. You've got Diana Rigg as one of the all-time, great Bond love interests. Telly Savalas' Blofeld is very memorable and some amazing, amazing stunts. So I feel like within that franchise, particularly within that 60s into the maybe even till the Daniel Craig era, this one is probably the most cinematic. So I think I'm going to come down on Her Majesty's.
Okay, so we have a provision. If this happens, we're going to toss a digital coin. I have a website that tosses a coin for you. I'm going to get Cam to call it in the air when I tell him to, and then it will decide our fate. So, Cam, call it now.
Heads.
Congratulations on Her Majesty's Secret Service is moving on to the next round. I will keep my love for the 39 Steps to myself, and I will cry myself to sleep this evening. But then again, both terrific films, so I can't really lament it too much.
No, but I think a lot of these are going to sting.
Well, speaking of lamenting, up next we have Black Book, a terrific film. I think the only foreign language film on this list.
So far, yeah. Oh, no, actually Ghost in the Shell would have been, but obviously not up for the brackets.
Oh, very true. Well, we have Black Book, the Paul Verhoeven film, versus everyone's favorite except for mine, The Ipcress File.
This one's easy for me.
Yeah, I'm okay. A lot of people will be expecting me to be like, well, it's Black Book because I hate The Ipcress File. I voted for The Ipcress File to go onto the NOC list. I can acknowledge how important it is to spy film history and to British film and to all kinds of these. Its historical impact is well known, well regarded. It's on like the BFI 100 best British films of all time for good reason. It just doesn't vibe with me. Everyone has a couple of things that everyone knows is the best, and you just don't like it. Like I love Limp Bizkit, and some people don't. They're wrong. That's fine. But I often compare the Ipcress File to Limp Bizkit. I will vote for Ipcress File to go through, much as I love Black Book, but I just know Ipcress File is a better film.
I want the Ipcress File to keep rolling. So, that's right. Bring in the class. Anyways,
I said we were lowbrow at the start. It hasn't changed.
Yeah. So this one is pretty easy for me. I think I would come down on Ipcris File, which I think is a pretty perfect movie in terms of the story it wants to tell. And I mean, it's easily my favorite of that franchise. Those TV movies really didn't do it for me, and I liked Funeral in Berlin, but Billion Dollar Brain I found a bit of a sit. But like the Ipcris File just feels somewhat inspired, like from the music to Michael Caine's performance to just a lot of the imagery and the way they shoot, their crazy angles that we see evoked also in like the Avengers movie, the 98 Avengers, the way they were picking up on visual cues from the Ipcris. I think it's had a lot of influence. Black Book is terrific, but even you and I were looking at Black Book, as much as we love the movie, and especially the lead performance by Carice Van Houten, that movie kind of wears out its welcome a little bit when you get to that end and they keep introducing new crises for the character to go through. So, like, in terms of storytelling, I think Ipcris is focused. It tells exactly the story it wants to tell and does it exceedingly well. Whereas I would say, like, Black Book is a fantastic film to watch, but it has maybe some issues that didn't hold it back from making the list, but I would definitely pull into play when I'm talking about a bracket here.
I mean, personally, I would say the Ipcris File is 148 minutes too long.
148 minutes? Oh, not 148 minutes. It's an hour and 48 minutes.
Oh, you're right. Exactly. Yes, that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's Ipcris File, Cam. I think that even I can be a pragmatist about it. I think I'll just put that through to the next round.
Yeah, I mean, we would love to have a Paul Verhoeven movie go the distance on this this tournament, but who knows? Maybe Total Recall one day.
I wouldn't buy Ipcris File for $1. Almost as bad as the Limp Bizkit reference. Next up, we have The Spy in Black, a favorite of ours, the Conrad Veidt film, up against Goldfinger.
Well, this one's kind of a slam dunk. I mean,
just wait till we get to the next round. It gets horrible.
Yeah, like, I mean, I would say Goldfinger is kind of the perfect Bond movie in some ways. Like, it's not my favorite all-time Bond film, but like in terms of the construction, the way it sets all the elements into place, the huge phenomenon it created, obviously, just with its success. But like, it is, and I have said this a couple times on the show, it is like Raiders of the Lost Ark. It is machine-tooled to perfection. It is the ultimate Bond experience. They would obviously riff off what Goldfinger did for decades to come, and I think that's important. This is the one that set the standard, and it did it so unbelievably well.
There's a reason why they would say, when they go too far away, we need to get back to more Goldfinger and sort of ground it some more. It is the template. That even now, in No Time to Die, there's bits that they're taking from Goldfinger. It's the template of Bond films going forward. It's the perfection of the formula. Now, there are bits that I still don't like about the film, but it's hard to say no to Goldfinger. Much as I love The Spy in Black, I think in terms of like a 1930s spy film, you're not going to get much better.
No.
Conrad Veidt is fantastic in it. It's weird to see a villain become someone you root for. That film is very successful at doing that.
And I mean, Powell and Pressburger did a fantastic job just, directing and writing that one. I think we have other films of theirs coming up in the future. I may be wrong about that, but I think we do. Like a great entry in their filmography, but it's more of like a great curio. It's one we would recommend people check out, but The Spy in Black has almost no imprint in terms of kind of, if you're like a huge film buff, people don't really mention this one. It was something that we found that we think is really important for people to watch and really worth watching, but it's not one that has that kind of influence. No,
and I think that's part of the magic of what we do is finding some of these lesser-known films and putting a spotlight on them. And especially ones that we think are good enough to go on the NOC list, and The Spy in Black is one of them. But up against a titan such as Goldfinger, I think that's a pretty easy one. So I'm putting Goldfinger through to the next round.
Definitely.
Up next, another Bond film, Dr. No versus 3 Days of the Condor.
Oh, this is a bloodbath.
Yeah, I have a gut instinct I'm going to go with. And I'll justify it. I'm going to go for 3 Days of the Condor out of the two. much as I'm a fan of Doctor No, and I like kind of that, like, it's like the vicious Bond that we don't really see again until like maybe For All Your Eyes Only, or License to Kill or something like that. I enjoy that aspect of it, but it feels like a film that they haven't quite perfected it yet. Not perfected yet, I suppose is the catchphrase. But whereas 3 Days of the Condor is the perfect paranoid spy thriller. It's Robert Redford at the height of his magical, handsome powers, riding that electric bicycle through New York straight into my heart.
Yeah, this one actually, I agree. I think 3 Days of the Condor is just the more important film in some ways. Like Dr. No is a movie that I didn't really care for when I was young, and in more recent, probably the last decade, I've really fallen in love with it, and it's one I watch over and over again. But it is proto Bond. It like Goldfinger is the one that really nails down that template, whereas like Dr. No, it has maybe some issues along the way, even though I think it is a pretty fantastic film. So 3 Days of the Condor is the one, though, that I think has much more of an impact on spy cinema. I would say Goldfinger has more impact in terms of, Bond on the genre, on spy film, than Dr. No. Even From Russia with Love, I think, has a little more than Dr. No. So I can come down on 3 Days of the Condor. I think that one is just a amazing, riveting film.
No, and you look at what the NOC List is trying to do is provide an example for people what the best spy films are. And if someone were to say, are you going to show someone who's never seen a spy film before, Dr. No or 3 Days of the Condor, I think I'd give them 3 Days of the Condor first.
Yeah, and if someone said, give me a Bond film that represents the best of Bond, I'm not going to say Dr. No first. And if they said, name me a 70s spy film that represents the best of that decade, I would say Condor.
Yeah. Man.
That's right.
It's like the unofficial spokesman of this podcast. I'm so glad we had Barbara Carrera on. I still need to try and get Michael Crawford. I will make it happen. Well, okay. 3 Days of the Condor through to the next round. Next up, Zero Dark 30, a recent addition to the NOC List, up against Spy Kids in a contest no one thought that you'd ever hear on a podcast.
Two feel-good spy movies duking it out in the brackets here.
Ironically, Spy Kids was torture for you.
Yeah, like it wasn't torture, but like Spy Kids was. This is a slam dunk for Zero Dark 30 for me. I just think Catherine Bigelow's work with that movie and Jessica Chastain's performance is just next level great. I really, really appreciated that movie revisiting it. But like Spy Kids, it's fun. I think it's a great entry for kids to watch. I don't think this is an all-time great spy story, though.
Well, you're wrong. Again, you're wrong. I just think it's the best kids film I think we're probably ever going to see on this show. I mean, there's like Cars 2. You could say the Indiana Jones films are kids films. There's a few things out there that maybe will trump it. Condor Man, of course. But Spy Kids is such a relaxing 90 minutes with it's a bit silly, it's a bit childish. It's not as bad as Spy Kids 4. It's if someone said what's the best Spy Kids film, well, it's Spy Kids.
Sure.
Literally. I'm not going to recommend people Zero Dark 30 necessarily if they ask me for a good spy film. Now, I think it is a very good spy film, and that's why it made the NOC List, but I'm not sure I would hand it out before I handed out Spy Kids.
It's the procedural elements of Zero Dark 30 that also put it really high for me, because like I think it is an incredibly well done spy procedural, and I think a lot of those movies in that genre tend to fall a little more on the fantasy or stuff like that. This one, it gets to the dirty work, but makes it riveting the way it's kind of conveyed on screen.
You're getting a bit floopy, mate. You need to chill out. I got some.
Okay.
I think we're going to turn to the coin for this one, Cam. What do you think?
Okay, flip that coin.
All right. Let's go for it. Call it in the air.
Tails, as in Tales of a Talking Dog, as we see in Spy Kids 4.
Heads.
Your
luck ran out, my friend. Spy Kids is going through to the next round. Sorry, Zero Dark 30, and sorry all you serious movie fans. Scott's ruined the day for you, everyone, as I know how to do. Well, no, that didn't make the NOC List.
True.
Right. Well, okay. Up next, Cam's favourite, and I'm sure he's going to go to bat for this one to no end, and I might fall asleep immediately. It is Thunderball up against Bridge of Spies.
Oh, this is an interesting one where, like, I love both of them, but I don't put them at that like god tier of spy films.
Yeah.
It's two really, really good spy films, even great maybe. Um, Well, like the thing is, I don't want to consistently be like, well, that Bond film's iconic, ergo it moves on. When other films are doing interesting things, and I think Bridge of Spies was, I mean, Mark Rylance's performance alone is one of the most memorable spy characters I've encountered in the past several decades of spy movies, and just the way that they make all of those scenes of negotiations just so tense, and that look at the Cold War. I think I can honestly put this one ahead of Thunderball. Thunderball is, and we've talked about it, it's going on vacation with Bond. It is like immersing yourself in the Bond universe, but it's not necessarily a, carry you by the seat of your pants spy story like, say, a Goldfinger is. So I think I'm okay relaxing on Thunderball for once and handing it to Bridge of Spies.
Cam has finally run out of conch chowder.
Yeah, it's true.
It's about time.
The peeing dog is aimed in my direction.
Would it help if we put Bridge of Spies through to the next round? Yes, I think it would. I personally agree with you, Cam. Bridge of Spies is... Well, I'm not a big Thunderball fan. I think there's 28 minutes of underwater sequences, and I just can't stand watching them. I did that whole thing. I watched it on the big screen to try and help, and it didn't. Almost sent me to sleep. Bridge of Spies didn't. We had a really great interview with the film's screenwriter, Matt Charman, on the show as well, and that helped me love it even more. I think we're soon to go and do another podcast guest appearance about this film just because of how much coverage we did on Bridge of Spies. I think it's just a wonderful Spielberg film. I mean, that combination of Hanks, Spielberg, Rylance, you really can't go wrong. And if you also, I want to point out, if you look at this list of films, there isn't many serious spy films.
Yep.
And I want to promote that side of spy films too. Not that that's necessarily my natural habitat. I prefer my sort of action pulpy stuff. I think Bridge of Spies is a shining example of an approachable, dark and gritty spy film.
Yeah, and I think it's the only Spielberg movie we've done so far. We did War of the Worlds on the Patreon, but I'd like to send Spielberg into the next round.
Absolutely. So Bridge of Spies has beaten down Thunderbolt, gone to the next round. Next up, this is a toughie. True Lies, a film that does not get enough love, up against From Russia with Love.
This one is exceedingly easy for me. I think this is From Russia with Love. Yeah, I think True Lies is, in terms of 90s blockbusters, I think very important, hugely impactful Schwarzenegger film. Really the last Schwarzenegger movie that mattered before his career began to slide. James Cameron, though, it's low-tier James Cameron, I think. And the fact it's never gotten any sort of Blu-ray release or, 4K release, it's basically just sat dormant. I think there's some, we talked about it in the show, there's some definite dated elements to this one that hurt it. So I love what Jamie Lee Curtis is doing in the movie. I think she's a ton of fun, like great performance there. But like, I look at From Russia with Love and the impact it has and just how unbelievably well told that Bond story is. And I think From Russia with Love is not just like, I think most people would regard it not just as one of the all-time Bonds, but also one of the great spy entertainments.
Well, it's the Hitchcock Bond, isn't it, really? It's taking elements of North by Northwest and weaving it into a Bond story, and for the better, I would say. Now, I love True Lies and I love my pulpy spy action films, but it's hard to compare a parody against the original. Because let's remember, True Lies is a loving parody of Bond films.
Yeah.
Even from like the beginning scene where Arnie's turning up in the swimsuit and it takes it off and unveils the white tuxedo, just like Sean Connery did.
Mm-hmm. And that whole scene with the out-of-control limos in the Florida Keys is just incredible. So, like, it's taking Bond action and also kind of raising the bar on what you can do with that as well. So, like, it's a really fun movie. I wish they would put out a proper version of it. It's ridiculous. It's sitting in a, like, vault somewhere because it's a movie that...
I think he said he's done it. He's done the transfer to 4K. It just has not been put out.
Yeah, it's the same as, like, The Abyss. It's, like, just sitting there somewhere, and they can't be bothered putting it out. So, hopefully they do that, because I do think True Lies, while I don't think belongs in the same, same breath as, like, some of the other movies on the NOC list, it should have like a legacy. It should have people discovering it, because I think James Cameron's an important filmmaker, and I don't like it when important works from directors are just kind of left in cobwebs.
We get messages at least once every couple of weeks asking if we know any information about the re-release of True Lies.
Yeah.
It on some sort of social media, and I wish I had more information for people, but it's just an absolute shame. But I can acknowledge that From Russia with Love is a stronger film, so I think that's going through to the next round.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we have two more fights left before we get to the next round. Next up, an interesting one: The Day of the Jackal versus Argo.
Huh.
There's nothing that like immediately jumps out and goes, "Oh, this is this one." It's not like an instant winner.
Yeah. It's okay. So like, Day of the Jackal was, I thought, really effective in just doing that kind of procedural, like hitman story. And I think the spy threads are strong enough, just because it's very clear the Jackal has, spy training. Like there's just no way that character doesn't. And just the way that like Edward Fox plays him is just chilling. Argo is just like a really fun entertainment with some very tense sequences. But like, I think I'm going to come down on Jackal, because I think Jackal just feels like it pulls you in and is a little more immersive. Whereas like Argo is that, straight down the middle of the line, audience pleasing entertainment that like, it still has some elements that you kind of go like, well, I don't know, this feels a little fake, even though it's trying to be a true story. There's elements that feel a little Hollywood manipulated. Whereas like I look at Jackal and it's such a pure film. It is exactly what those filmmakers intended. And it is also something that like, there's nothing really like it. Whereas I feel like I've seen movies kind of like Argo.
What are you talking about? The Jackal. It's just like it.
Oh yeah, sure.
I actually I'm inclined to agree. It's a toughie. I think Argo is a really enjoyable film, and I'm far less of a film buff than you are, so I do tend to enjoy my sort of more mainstream entries. But there's something so magnetic about The Day of the Jackal. You can't take your eyes away from it, despite it being 2 hours. You're drawn into this world of the Jackal, and Edward Fox is fantastic in the film. And not to say that people aren't fantastic in Argo, but it does have that sort of Hollywood veneer on it that can rub some people the wrong way. And I love the story they're telling in Argo. It's why it's on the NOC list to begin with. I just think out of the two, Day of the Jackal was perhaps a slightly stronger film.
Yeah. And I mean, if you ask me of the 2010s, like what's the best spy film, I would probably be leaning more towards like Bridge of Spies over like an Argo. So that tells me enough.
Okay. It looks like Day of the Jackal's going through. Last one in this round. The Man Who Knew Too Much. This is the 1950s version. Versus Where Eagles Dare.
This one's actually pretty easy for me. I really enjoy The Man Who Knew Too Much. Both versions. But the Jimmy Stewart, Doris Day one is just like a fun ride. It's totally Hitchcock having fun. Whereas like Where Eagles Dare is just like one of the, it's just such a fun men on a mission movie. Like Richard Burton and Clint Eastwood, you can tell the influence it had on things like Star Wars, and just so many sequences that I continue to think about. Like when we did that one, I'd seen it the once and I hadn't really thought about it that much. Since we watched it again, I think about Where Eagles Dare all the time.
I rewatched it at Christmas.
Yeah.
Just recently. And it shocked me how well it held up. And, I mean, not to get too sort of inside baseball, but it's one of our most listened to episodes.
Yeah.
Despite it being an older film, despite us having no guests on it, it's just me and you talking, there's something about this film that draws people to it. I think it's just one of those films that maybe doesn't get the sort of love it deserves in the press. Like, it's not getting 4K releases as far as I'm aware.
Yeah.
But those who do know it, love it.
Yeah, and I mean, I'd like to have a Clint film move on because, Firefox didn't make the NOC list, and I think Where Eagles Dare is a pretty damn cool movie. Like, if you're going to ask what are the cool movies on the NOC list, Where Eagles Dare ranks pretty high.
And to be true to what I said when we covered The Man Who Knew Too Much, I actually preferred the 1930s version out of the two. It was you and Calvin, our guest on that episode, that pushed this through to the next round. So It only makes sense that I would vote for Where Eagles Dare.
Yep, I think that makes sense.
Okie dokie, we're down to the next round now. We have 12 competitors left, whittling it down to a group of 6. Our first one, and these are going to get very tough.
Oh, yeah.
Our first one is the Bourne Supremacy versus GoldenEye.
I think this one is actually a little easier for me. In some ways,
really?
like, look, at this point, I have to just acknowledge I love all these movies. And so it's almost impossible for me to say, well, clearly one's better than the other, because I can't do that. So I think with this one, I look at, okay, Jason Bourne, what's the greatest Bourne film? Bourne Supremacy. That's what I would immediately say. If you come to me and say, what's the greatest Bond film? It probably wouldn't be GoldenEye. I would probably have a different answer.
That's where my brain was going to, down this exact argument. Like, it's more of a case of the best of the best. There's no knocking these, if you pardon the pun. It's more just like, what do we want to highlight more? And I think I would probably send people more to Supremacy before I would send them to GoldenEye. Not that I wouldn't send them to either. I just think I'd send them to Supremacy first. And also, there are other Bond entries that perhaps might make it through to the next round.
Yeah.
And I would like to give something else a chance.
Here's another point, actually. What's the definitive Paul Greengrass Bourne film? I say Bourne Supremacy.
Yep.
What's the definitive Martin Campbell Bond film?
It's a film we haven't tackled on the show yet.
Yeah, right? So I think that's kind of the way I have to look at this one.
Very interesting. But, not to throw shade at GoldenEye, it's the reason why I talk about Bond films on a podcast.
We love all of these films, let's be fair. Everything that's on the NOC list we had an absolute blast with, so...
Whoa.
Every single one, especially the Ipcris file.
Shut up, Cam. 100 episodes of this nonsense. Okay. Well, that was a pretty easy one. That was pretty painless. So, the Bourne Supremacy is going through to the next round. Next up, we have... Oh my God. North by Northwest versus On Her Majesty's Secret Service. If this isn't a showdown of the greatest of the greats, I don't know what is.
I think like this one is actually...
I know my answer.
Yeah. I love On Her Majesty's Secret Service. I think it's one of the all-time great Bonds. But like, I mean, North by Northwest is Hitchcock, like at the height of his powers, creating like the ultimate entertainment. Like, how do I slide that over top of On Her Majesty's? As much as I love that movie, it doesn't even have like a Connery. It's got, George Lazenby as the star. Whereas like Cary Grant, Eva Marie Saint, James Mason, like the set pieces of North by Northwest. That's got to be North by Northwest.
You're taking the words out of my mouth. I love On Her Majesty's Secret Service, apart from its lead. There's like a minus mark against this film for me to start off with, whereas for me, North by Northwest is potentially one of the greatest spy films of all time, and I think I will be fighting for this film in many Champion of Champions shows down the road.
Yeah.
I think I will be, and I actually post about this film quite a lot when I find trivia out about it. I think it's just a very fascinating film to dive into. So I don't think I could vote for On Her Majesty's. I think it is North by Northwest.
I also think North by Northwest is one of the most rewatchable movies on the list. Like, I think you could totally sit down and watch that quite often, whereas I don't know how many people really heavily rewatch On Her Majesty's.
I saw it a couple of times last year when we did our episode.
Yeah.
With Stephen and Shayla. And then I saw it on the big screen this year. And I think I'm okay for a little while now. I think I don't have to watch it for a couple of years.
It's like a bit of a luxurious film. I feel like when Bond fans are rewatching a lot of the Bond films, it tends to be more things like your Goldfingers, Spy Who Loved Me's, Goldeneye, kind of those more...
License to Kill.
Yeah, more of those like high energy kind of Bond stories, whereas like On Her Majesty's is kind of like it's more like a book almost. You want to sit down, take it all in, but you don't necessarily have that one on repeat.
No. Okay, well that was surprisingly easy then. North by Northwest is making the next round. Next up. This should be fun. It's the Ipcris file versus Goldfinger.
Oh, brother. I mean,
So it's Goldfinger, right?
It is Goldfinger, because you just look at the shadow that Goldfinger cast on the entire genre. And then it does it so well. It's not like a movie that was a huge success, had a huge influence, but when you go back and watch it, it's pretty creaky. It still holds up fantastically well. Ipcris file I love a lot, but at the end of the day, I mean, you just asked the spy fans out there. Although, you know what? Ipcris really does have a strong support, so maybe that's not fair. But I do think 60 spy films, what's the most important film? People probably would say Goldfinger.
I do want to acknowledge that I designed this bracket, although it was randomized. And so for people crying foul, I want to offer you listeners an olive branch, as well as you, Cam. I think we both agree that Goldfinger should go through to the next round.
Yeah.
But I think we could also both agree that both films are very influential and very important to the spy genre. So would you by any chance want to leave it to the game of chance?
I don't know. Like, if it was a different Bond film than Goldfinger, I would say yes. If it was On Her Majesty's, I'd be like, yep, let's do it. Goldfinger, I just think, like, the impact of Goldfinger is just so unshakable.
I just think many aren't going to begrudge us putting Goldfinger through, but there are a lot of Ipcris-file fans out there. Most of them have tuned us out by now and unsubscribed because of my slanderous attacks on the film for the last 2 years. But there are some people that are thinking, is this a bit dodge, what they're doing here? They're eliminating Ipcris-file so early on. I mean, it's up against Goldfinger, let's not forget. That is the prototype of Bond.
It is. It's the one that set the mold.
Yeah, go listen to our episode with Calvin Dyson on Goldfinger if you want to hear us talk about it more.
Yeah.
I think it should be Goldfinger. I'm offering the coin olive branch. Are you happy with Goldfinger going through?
I think it's Goldfinger.
Okay. I'm sorry, Ipcris-file fans. You can send me a letter to... you'll find me in the post box outside of the Royal Albert Hall.
That's right.
Yeah, I'll be filming people from the other side of it. Moving on. An interesting one, actually. I think I know the answer already. It is 3 Days of the Condor versus Spy Kids.
Next.
Even I can't defend Spy Kids at this point. I think 3 Days of the Condor is going to go through. Is it worth discussing further?
No, this one's a slam dunk.
Okay. See you later, Spy Kids. You lost to the second round. That's better than some of the Bond films did. Up next, we have Bridge of Spies versus From Russia with Love.
Oof. This is the toughest one so far in this particular section in round 2.
Much as I don't want a ton of Bond films to go through because I think the spy genre does not revolve around James Bond, you need to acknowledge the highlights when you have them. Now, we've only tackled about 9 Bond films of 27 so far, maybe 10 Bond films of 27 so far in the show, in our 2-year run so far. There are many more to come, and there are some very big highlights that we haven't even touched yet.
Mm-hmm.
But From Russia with Love is one of the ones that always stands out for me. Goldfinger is, I think, probably, out of the ones we've covered so far, probably the best. I don't think From Russia with Love is far off from that. Bridge of Spies is a fantastic film. It's a very glossy look at the gritty spy film. You know, the man who came from the Cold-esque Cold War spy film. Obviously, the Spielberg, of it all. But I think for me, From Russia with Love just has that edge, that literal edge. And that will carry it forward.
Well, I think when you ask what are the most impactful or the best of the Connery Bond era, you're going to have people say Goldfinger, probably followed by From Russia with Love. So I think it's like important for that reason. Yeah, whereas like what's the best Spielberg movie? Bridge of Spies isn't going to be on the tip of people's tongues. It's a fantastic movie. Mark Rylance deserved that Oscar, but I think From Russia with Love is the one that has more influence.
Okay, From Russia with Love's going through. The last of the second round, we've got The Day of the Jackal versus Where Eagles Dare.
This is an interesting one in that, like, neither one of them are movies that necessarily jump to the forefront of spy fans' minds when they think of, like, the all-time great spy films, but they both are terrific movies. I wouldn't say one had more influence than the other, really. I mean, I would say probably Jackal had a little more, but not so much that I would be like, oh, clearly, it's not like a Goldfinger out in front favorite. Where are you thinking on this one?
I am leaning towards there has to be a point where like hangout fun is not enough, where like pure filmmaking needs to come in, and I think Day of the Jackal has Where Eagles Dare pipped at the post just when it comes to pure cinematic experience.
Yeah.
But there is something very cool about hanging out with Clint Eastwood. fighting some Nazis. I think that's a very great idea, and there's a great female protagonist in the film, and that's something you rarely see in spy films, and that's something I do want to highlight. But Day of the Jackal, there's just something about that film.
It feels like such a pure directorial vision. Like Fred Zinnemann, I believe, directed that one. Whereas, like, there's a lot of Men on a Mission movies made in that particular time period, and I look at ones more like The Great Escape as like the great visions of what that could be. Whereas I don't know that I would say that about Where Eagles Dare.
I am gonna say though, and I think I've just changed my own vote. Out of the two, what is the more pure spy film? That's Where Eagles Dare. And I think at this point, that factor needs to start coming into it a little bit more as well. What's closer to what you would consider a spy film? They are spies in Where Eagles Dare. In Day of the Jackal, you could sort of figure out that the Jackal used to be an operative of some sort, but really it is an assassination flick and sort of a chase film. So on that side of it, I'm going to go with Where Eagles Dare.
Okay, I'm going to go for Jackal. So let's leave this one up to the coin of chance and see where it lands. Because I don't think there is a clear winner out of these two.
No, and I imagine people at home will probably be quite split as well of which one they want to go through. So we're going to leave it to chance. Cam, as it always, call it in the air. Go for it.
Okay, I'm going to go Tails again.
Tails it is.
Okay, so Jackal is moving on.
The Jackal is reaching closer to its target. Well, that was round 2. We're into the third round now. We have 6 films to whittle down to the final 3. And they are tough.
This is like the all-timers crew. So at this point, no matter what gets knocked out, they're all victors here.
Yeah, they absolutely are. First up, we have the Bourne Supremacy versus North by Northwest.
Uh-huh.
I have a gut feeling on this one pretty quickly, I have to say.
So do I.
Is it North by Northwest?
It is North by Northwest, yeah. To me, it's the Bourne Supremacy is the best Bourne film, the best Paul Greengrass Bourne film. But is it a masterpiece? I don't quite think so. It's close, but I wouldn't say quite so. Whereas I would say that North by Northwest, I mean, come on.
And, the Bourne Supremacy and the Bourne films had a massive impact in spy cinema going forward. When we did our Bourne Roundtable recently, we were talking about the connective tissue between the Bourne films and the Casino Royale reboot in 2006 of the Bourne films that really reinvigorated that franchise once again after GoldenEye did it in 95. And that you can just smell Bourne all over those films. It really did leave its mark. That being said, North by Northwest, you will see clips of that crop duster in movie montages to this day.
Mm-hmm.
It goes beyond what's a good spy film, and I think it just goes to what's a good film.
Yeah, and you'll see homages to it in things like The English Patient or even Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Even, in the MCU in the 2010s, they're let's have a nod to North by Northwest.
Yeah, you just can't fight that. So North by Northwest is going through to more or less the final round. Next up, we have Goldfinger versus 3 Days of the Condor.
I give up.
Two perfect films. I have a gut feeling again.
What's your gut feeling?
I think it's Goldfinger. I think 3 Days of the Condor is a fantastic paranoid spy thriller from the 70s, but it's very of the 70s. Not to say that the Goldfinger isn't of the 60s. Good lord, some of the choices in that film. But we keep saying it's the prototype. It's the thing they look to for spy films from 1965, I think it was 64 maybe, onwards.
Yeah.
To partially this day.
Yeah.
So I don't think you can escape the shadow of Goldfinger. I'm going to sip my mint julep now and listen to what you think.
I also want there to be a real battle for the final 3 there, where, the winner, it has to earn it. And I think if you're saying North by Northwest is in that round, and then you're throwing in 3 Days of the Condor, like I don't know. Like I love Condor, but I don't know that that's necessarily the most compelling of matchups. Whereas like Goldfinger, I think that's one hell of a matchup. So I'm gonna go for Goldfinger as well.
Okay. The last one in this round, we have From Russia with Love versus The Day of the Jackal. This one feels kind of easy.
It does. And you're thinking From Russia with Love?
Yes. I wish I wasn't. I personally think if Where Eagles Dare was here, I think it would have been a different conversation.
I would not feel like Where Eagles Dare would belong in that final category, I don't think. From Russia with Love, many will cite it as the best Bond film ever. I'm not like I'm a huge Bond fan. I love all the movies. Like I was concerned when we started this show that I would be giving passes to like every Bond film because they're just so rewatchable to me.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually did make a bit of a concentrated effort to not do that, to have critical looks at all of them and say, okay, this one doesn't quite belong in. But this is a case where I go like, From Russia with Love, I don't know there's any arguments real against it. Whereas like Jackal, you raised it. Like, is it a full-on spy film? It has heavy, heavy espionage elements, but I don't think it necessarily belongs in kind of that final round with, we're looking at North by Northwest and Goldfinger, two of the most impactful spy films of all time. So I think I have to say From Russia with Love just on that basis.
And you got to think, From Russia with Love is a riff off of North by Northwest with Bond influences as well.
Yeah.
I mean, it's basically a combination of Goldfinger and North by Northwest. It's the child of the two.
Yeah.
Despite one coming before the other. But you understand what I mean.
Yeah.
So, I think From Russia with Love goes into the final round. So, we have 3 films. I think what we should do is pick a third place, and then we have a standoff for the first and second.
Okay.
So, the 3 films in the final are North by Northwest, Goldfinger, and From Russia with Love.
This is actually really easy for me for the third place.
Same. I think it's From Russia with Love.
Yeah, because the thing is, that movie is picking up all its cues from North by Northwest. You have all these homages. You have the helicopter sequence at the end, which is taken, from the crop duster. So, like, they refer to this one all the time as the most Hitchcockian Bond, and it's because of that North by Northwest influence and then the other Hitchcock spy films. So, like, for me, you can't beat the originator if you are the one kind of paying homage to it. So I have to say third place for From Russia.
Yeah, I don't think you'll have many arguments from listeners at this point. I think you'll all agree with us that From Russia with Love is a deserved third place.
Yeah.
And a Bond film is going into the showdown at the finale. So I think that leads us on perfectly to North by Northwest versus Goldfinger for the greatest spy film of our first 100 films.
Well,
can I pitch who I think should win?
Yeah.
I want North by Northwest to win.
I'm kind of in the same boat because I also feel like North by Northwest really did set the template for what the Bond movies were picking up on and running with.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, like, just the filmmaking that Alfred Hitchcock is achieving. Like, Alfred Hitchcock is one of the great auteurs and someone who I continue to be fascinated by his work. Whereas, like, I look at the directorial work of the Bond films, and it could be fantastic. Guy Hamilton did a great job with Goldfinger, but this is not Hitchcock-level direction, and I think that counts for something when we are choosing, the definitive spy film out of the first 100. I want sort of that strong stamp of an artist on it, and I think North by Northwest really has that.
And I also don't think that Bond has necessarily had its biggest guns yet on the show.
No.
Personally speaking, it's had some of its biggest, but not the biggest to me. And I imagine we'll be tackling that probably in the next 100.
The Man with the Golden Gun, coming soon.
Of course. It's all about that third nipple. I always say that, like, the Bond films are not the be-all and end-all of spy movies, and I get a bit of flack online, and the show does sometimes, because we don't focus on Bond enough. And that's fine. If you want to hear Bond, that's fine. And I don't want people to think I'm voting down Goldfinger. I voted Goldfinger to the final round.
It's so important, that movie. Like, it's just, yeah, like, we are not underestimating just the sheer power that Goldfinger had in launching a craze that we love.
There's a reason why we tackled it so early on. There's a reason why it's on the NOC list. It's clearly, to me, Alfred Hitchcock's best spy movie.
Yeah, there's a few we haven't tackled, but I don't think Topaz apologists are going to be fighting with you too much about that one. Yeah, there's a couple other really good ones we haven't tackled, but I tend to think when it comes to Hitchcock spy films, the two that immediately jump to mind are Notorious and North by Northwest.
Yeah, there's something just so classic and stylish about that film. It just flies by. Never a dull moment. And you actually can't say that for Goldfinger either. It's just, if someone was going to say to you, show me the best spy movie of all time, I think I'd reach for North by Northwest.
I think I have to agree with that.
Yeah. Well, the final three. In third place is From Russia with Love. In second place is a very well-earned Goldfinger, which means the number one spy movie in our first 100 films is Alfred Hitchcock's North by Northwest. I can't think of a more deserved winner. It's certainly one of my favorites. So obviously, if you disagree with some of our choices, do let us know online. But yeah, I'm really proud of that, actually.
Yeah, and I think it's one that walks a fine line where it doesn't like kind of discount the spy stuff. It doesn't just feel like it's working in spycraft just for like kind of disposable fun. Like, it kind of takes it seriously, but at the same time is just a top flight entertainment.
Yeah. And it's also quite a rich text. From rewatches, you can get a lot out of North by Northwest. I'm not sure what you can get from multiple rewatches of Goldfinger.
Sure.
Personally. Still a lot to love, though, and I'm not bad-mouthing Goldfinger. I just think North by Northwest literally is just edging past it.
Yeah, I agree.
There you go, folks. That's the top of the NOC list in the first 100. There was definitely some hot takes in there, Cam.
Well, I have a question for you. Which one stung the most to lose?
Ooh. Where Eagles Dare, probably.
Yeah.
I really wanted to hang on to that. I don't think it would have got much further than Jackal did. But, yeah. And I was kind of sad to see GoldenEye go so early. But it was up against something that it deserved not to win. So
GoldenEye definitely jumps out.
What about you?
Notorious is the one that I think stings the most for me.
I think it's just me and you have developed quite a personal affection for that film. We did a commentary on the Patreon. Even in true Alfred Hitchcock fashion, I had my mother-in-law on that episode. Like, we both love that film, and I think we both gained a higher appreciation for it from covering it on this show. But
yeah.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special report.
Calling all agents. Independent podcasting, much like the spy game, requires considerable resources. Whether it's research, equipment, hosting, or of course constructing a top secret volcano lair, we're putting out the call for your support.
That's right. As you may know, we've activated the SpyHards Patreon, home of our ever-growing lineup of Agents in the Field episodes where we decode non-spy films from your favorite spy actors and full film commentaries with more intel than a Basil exposition briefing.
Cam, what have we got in our crosshairs this month?
The Taken commentary? Oh, it's live. And we're going to look at the first installment in the Clint Eastwood franchise, Dirty Harry, from 1971. I think it's going to make your day.
And if that sounds delicious, then become a true spy hard today and join the circus at patreon.com/spyhards. But before this message self-destructs, Cam, resume the spy jinx. But speaking of hot takes, I reached out online to get everyone's hot takes on our NOC List choices in the last 100 films. So Cam, for the first time ever, can you whip out the Basil Exposition hotline? Because I think we're about to get some voicemails.
Yes. So our first NOC List hot take comes from Gavin Clark. Gavin, take it away.
Listen to me. Listen to me. Listen to my voice. My voice. You love the Ipcress file. It is a cinematic masterpiece. You like gritty espionage films about red tape and interdepartmental rivalries. You like to watch men have a fight on the steps of the Royal Albert Hall. You like jaunty Dutch angles. You wish more spy films featured paperwork and were filmed through a telephone box or from behind a chair. Now repeat after me. I love the Ipcress file.
I don't love the Ipcress file, sorry. I never will. Gavin, I love you. I thank you for your voicemail. I don't think I'll ever quite get past my dislike of those jaunty Dutch angles or filming things through a telephone box. Maybe I'll be able to rid myself of those demons when I get to kick Cam down those stairs one day.
That's true. I mean, I love the Ipcress file. I would have liked to have seen it go further, but, up against Goldfinger, that's tough. Yeah, I'm on board. I'm Team Gavin on this one.
I do not oblige.
That's okay.
Our next voicemail is from a Mr. Tom Butler from the James Bond A to Z podcast.
Hello, Scott. Hello, Cam from SpyHards. It's Tom Butler here from the James Bond A to Z podcast. I've appeared on your show a couple of times, so thank you very much for having me. Congratulations on reaching 100 movies covered on the show. That's quite a milestone. So congratulations. I hear you're looking for hot takes about the NOC List. Well, I come with a steaming hot take for the NOC List. 65 million years in the making. Yes, I'm here to defend One of Our Dinosaurs is Missing. Yes, the movie that brought me to your podcast. Now, I will couch this by saying I haven't revisited One of Our Dinosaurs is Missing, but I will say that it was one of my childhood favourite movies, and so therefore I cannot sanction having it not on the NOC list. I don't know if it holds up, to be honest with you. I just remember it being a movie with a big dinosaur in it that as a 7-8-year-old, I blooming loved it. So, yeah, I know you guys had issues with a lot of the outdated themes of the film, which probably, you're completely correct about. So, I trust your judgment on it, but I will defend One of Our Dinosaurs is Missing as one of my childhood favourites, because you know what? Nostalgia is a powerful thing, and where would we all be without a little bit of nostalgia in our lives? So that's my hot take. Please feel free to dismiss it. And yeah, here's to another 100 or at least 200 more episodes of SpyHards podcast. See you guys soon.
Well, I want to thank Tom for sending in that lovely voicemail. You should definitely check out the James Bond A to Z podcast. If there's a Bond podcast you could listen to, that's one we always recommend. For me, interestingly, neither of us can say anything nice about One of Our Dinosaurs is Missing particularly. I don't think we could change our tune on it. And as Tom said, he hasn't watched it since he was a kid. But I do think this brings up an interesting point. And that is our exploration of some of these lesser known spy films and the interesting sort of consequences of doing so.
Right.
Because I've heard from numerous people that they heard of us through Condor Man, or One of Our Dinosaurs is Missing, or British Agent, or something like that. Maybe not British Agent, but, these beloved classics, things like Gotcha, things like Jumpin' Jack Flash that we've covered on the show, that, they might not be the biggest audience grabber when they first go out because people haven't seen them, but there's this nostalgia, as Tom says, and I think that's one of the things I really enjoy about this show, and I'm so glad we get to do it, is that we get to explore these lesser known films. Like, I don't think anyone's done a massive retrospective on Gotcha, but hey, we spoke to the director.
Right. And we have nothing against Dippy the dinosaur, as featured in One of Our Dinosaurs. He was delightful, and it was fun to see that skeleton pop up in Star Wars. But the movie, and I feel like I have a certain amount of expertise on this right now, where I have done this rewatch of a just massive amount of these 60s, 70s Disney films, and 50s ones actually as well, over the pandemic and continuing onwards, where I have watched a ton of these movies that I absolutely loved as a child. And it's actually quite astonishing when you go back and watch these, live action Disney films of those past decades, how few actually do hold up. And I would say, Tom, I would challenge you to rewatch One of Our Dinosaurs and see if you think it holds up, because I would argue no, but like I have found some do. 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea holds up fantastically well. Mary Poppins. There are some out there, but a lot of these kind of, and Disney was cranking these out like 4 or 5 a year. A lot of them do not hold up at all. And I would say One of Our Dinosaurs for me falls in that category of a lot of them where it's like, they kept kids occupied for 90 minutes, but they don't really offer much more.
No, and much as we don't mind a bowl of wonton soup from time to time, I don't see myself running back to One of Our Dinosaurs as missing, but nostalgia is a very powerful tool. And One of Our Dinosaurs is a perfect example. There's a lot of people who listen to the show that really love that film and can look past some of its more egregious choices. And I'm absolutely all for it. Like, I think we can learn our lesson looking at the film now, and we understand why you shouldn't do that. But there's no reason why, as a kid in the 70s or the 80s, when you saw that film, you can't enjoy it and look back on it fondly. And I'm glad we got to be the people, potentially the only people online talking about that film.
I would also argue a lot of the Bond passion comes from nostalgia, right?
Yeah. We talk about Goldfinger so much in the beginning part of this episode, but that's got some really problematic moments too.
Sure, and I mean, a lot of spy fans were introduced to Bond when they were young kids. I mean, I certainly was. So
yeah, absolutely. But yeah, Tom, I love your love. I just can't share it.
Yeah, I'm excited when I get submissions like that, because it's like, who's going to come on and defend One of Our Dinosaurs is Missing and get us talking about it again? I'm glad Tom did that for us.
Yeah, exactly. Our next message is from Mr. Sam Rogers. Hit it, Sam.
So congratulations to Scott and Cam on 100 episodes of SpyHards podcast. I would love to say that this is a fully celebratory message. However, I do have a bone to pick, or two, because my NOC List opinion is that both the first two Charlie's Angels movies definitely should not have been not on there, essentially. I honestly have so much fun with these films. I think they're just so entertaining, so much fun. Really lean into some of the tropes of spy movies and lean into the tropes of what Charlie's Angels, the TV series, was. And it's all ramped up to 1,000. It's quite remarkable how much it's different from a TV series that it's based on, yet it still works incredibly well. I think there's definitely choices there and certain directions that make it extremely larger than life, and kind of it feels kind of like in an alternate reality in a way, a heightened reality, where these three women can really do anything, and that includes the shift of gravity, not conforming to the laws of gravity. One of my favorite scenes is the basic pre-title sequence, essentially, of Charlie's Angels Full Throttle with the jam and the helicopter. It's just absolutely insane, but I think that's what I love so much about it. And I think that as much as there's definitely some dodgy elements and there's things that have not aged well, whether that's in terms of maybe some of what's shown on screen, whether it's to do with the story, the characterization, or the CGI and the effects. But I think overall it's fantastic, and I think no one can argue that Drew Barrymore, Cameron Diaz, and Lucy Liu have fantastic chemistry together, and are supported with some of the best actors to be around in those two films. So Sam Rockwell and Demi Moore, they're remarkable, and of course Crispin Glover as well, who just brings such an edge to a character that really shouldn't be anything, yet he's so memorable. The creepy thin man is just a fantastic, and Shia LaBeouf is in Full Throttle as well. So remarkable. So anyway, McG did a great job. I would love to see a third film, and I would definitely put them both onto the NOC List. So Scott and Cam, I'm happy to be part of another review of those two films to get them moved onto that list. Congratulations once again.
Well, Sam, I actually really appreciate that someone sent in a voicemail, championing the Charlie's Angels films. I can't quite come down for Full Throttle. Like, that one I really think was an inferior sequel to the original, but I wonder if it was like a little bit of snobbery. I still don't think I would put Charlie's Angels on the NOC List. I think it just falls a little short, but I think there was maybe a little bit of this isn't maybe quite hitting the bar of what we want on the NOC list because it's so silly. But like, I do think maybe it should have been a little more strongly considered. Because I think of those 3 performances, and I think also as we continued down the Charlie's Angels journey, and by the time we were watching that, especially, like the second and third, you began to reflect a little more on that first one and how effective it was at what it wanted to do, be that bubblegum movie. So like, I do have affection for Charlie's Angels. I would love it though, honestly, if we got a 4th Charlie's Angels film at some point that just really hit a home run, like really just cracked it out of the park. So fingers crossed that happens and we can get a Charlie's Angels film on the NOC list.
Yeah, I think I was a little nicer to the first film than you were. I think it had a lot more nostalgia for me.
Definitely.
When we reviewed it. So I can't remember if I said yes and you said no and we agreed not to put it on in the end, but I think I was definitely leaning towards yes on the NOC list, but it didn't make it, so I have to take responsibility for that. But I agree with your point, Cam, and I do hope we can get a Charlie's Angels film on there at some point. But what I do want to say, and one thing it does do well, and one thing we don't see enough of, is female-led spy films.
Yep.
And I think one thing that film should be celebrated for is putting the spotlight firmly on Barrymore, Diaz, and Liu, and letting them run amok on our screens for 2 whole films, and giving them as much agency as the films did, and letting them have separate lives outside of their missions, fully fleshed out characters. That was wonderful to see, and I think it's an element that's still sorely missing even today from spy movies.
Definitely. So why don't we move on to our next recording from Shayla, who joined us for the 355 fairly recently, actually.
This is your 3rd agent, Shayla, calling you from a very secure landline. Fear not, our call will not be traced. And I'm here to say congratulations on 100 episodes. That is so cool. You guys are so much fun to listen to, and you're such great people, and I look forward to many more episodes. That being said, I guess my one hot take would be I think Tomorrow Never Dies should be on the NOC list. I just think it's such a perfect Bond film. It goes by in a flash. It's super fun. And I think you guys goofed. But no, seriously, congratulations.
Well, I mean, there's a reason why Shayla is our 3rd agent. Another appearance on the show. Thank you, Shayla, for your wonderful voicemail. I am in full agreement with you. I think I even said yes on the NOC list and was voted down by Janine and Cam on that episode. So I'm going to let Cam answer for this one.
Yeah, I think it was, and I talked about this earlier in this episode where I said, when I went into this show, I was concerned about like just my Bond fandom would lead to every Bond film getting a yes vote. So I had to be very critical as to which Bond films I felt deserved it. And I thought, especially coming after GoldenEye, where to me that was a very clear yes. And we also did, I think, Dr. No after Goldfinger. I had to like then start to measure them against each other. And I felt like Tomorrow Never Dies wasn't kind of doing anything more that really kind of earned it that spot, even though I think it's a super solid, incredibly fun movie. It doesn't quite hit that bar necessary for me to cross into the NOC list. And I also voted against, as I said, like You Only Live Twice, for example. So to me, it's like kind of, I remember at the time they said they wanted to make a super solid Bond film. I think they did. I just don't think it quite hits that exceptional level.
Well, you can see Cam is clearly fatigued from recording this episode because he's talking nonsense.
That's right.
I agree. Tomorrow Never Dies should be on the NOC list, but there are no take-backsies. It is what it is. And to be fair, I think if it had ended up on this list today, I think it would have been eliminated quite early.
That's right.
Not quite a voicemail, this one, but we had a special message from Becky Leonardis, who is one of our supporters over on Patreon. We want to thank Becky, of course, and all our other patrons. And if you are thinking of joining the Patreon, do check it out on patreon.com/SpyHards to find out more. But Becky says, of course, well done for 100 episodes, but she wants to point out that The Rock was a film we did on our Agents in the Field series on Patreon, but she thinks it should be considered for the NOC list. And I actually think I'm in full agreement.
I think I can wrap my head around that one more now. I think at the time when we launched that, I was a little more stubborn in terms of like spy adjacent stuff, and I now am more open to considering things where like a lead character is a spy, even though the movie doesn't fall within the parameters of a spy film. So like at the time I was, again, very stubborn about this, but I think I can actually imagine a future where we do The Rock as a normal episode of SpyHards.
Well, I think we should just say now then that we will do it.
Yeah. I'll add it to the master list.
Okay. Becky, you're going to get your wish. We are going to cover The Rock on the main feed, and we'll get a chance to make the NOC list. But Cam, I think we now have a message from Ian Madrell.
Okay, so here's my hot take for the SpyHards podcast. It's about the film called The Parallax View. You know, the one with Warren Beatty where he's a journalist. So, my key point is with this film is that it's not actually a spy film. But I want to justify that selection. So, Warren Beatty is a journalist in the film, and he obviously investigates this company called the Parallax Company. But the point about the Parallax Company is that they're an entirely private company, and they seem to be acting pretty much by themselves. There's only really a whiff of government conspiracy involved in the background of the Parallax View, the film. And I'm not sure if it actually qualifies as a spy film. There's only really one bit of the film where I think Warren Beatty is kind of rifling through loads of files, and he discovers some documents that leads him to understand that the Parallax Company is behind all of these different political assassinations. But does that really actually make it a spy film? Does a spy have to be employed by a government organisation in order to make it a spy film? So that's really where I was stuck with it. So I suppose my key point of this whole thing is I think that the entry of the Parallax View on the NOC list is essentially completely and utterly invalid, given the fact that it's not actually a spy film. I suppose the debate you could have is what's the limit of a spy film? Does a spy film involve companies, or does a spy film involve governments? What's the classical definition of spying? So my argument would be is that a spy has to be from a government organisation, or there has to be some form of government or military involvement in spying. My problem is with this, I guess that opens up the door to any kind of where someone rifles through some files, and then you could actually consider that to be a spy film. I suppose one of the examples there would be something like The Enemy of the State with Will Smith and Gene Hackman. So you're sort of saying, well, it's government conspiracy, but Will Smith isn't really a spy. Gene Hackman, I think, used to be a spy, but then you sort of like, well, is it a spy film or is it not a spy film? Anyway, all of that said, I'm really enjoying the podcast, and it was just really one of my hot takes on the podcast that you've produced. I'm really happy to be a Patreon, looking forward to all the new episodes. So thanks a lot, SpyHards.
Well, thank you, Ian. Thank you for being a patron on our Patreon. And in terms of your point about the NOC list, this is what the hot takes were for, and I think it's a genuine conversation that maybe we won't dive into too much today. But I think it's an ongoing discovery for us on the show of what is and what is not a spy film. Cam has alluded to already in this conversation. When he started this show, he was quite buttoned up about these sorts of things. And he's definitely loosened his reins. And I know on our Parallax View episode, we did have a discussion about whether it qualifies or not. And I think it's an ongoing discussion. I think there's a lot. I think Enemy of the State, you mentioned, I think would qualify as something we would tackle. And I think we do plan to tackle it at some point. It's definitely an evolution. There are a lot of spy-adjacent, we use that term a lot on the show, spy-adjacent films. But I think it's, even if some of them aren't necessarily as close as we would like to a spy film, I think there's still room for conversation and analysis when it comes to these films. Now, I know it's more, your point was more, should it be on the NOC list because it's not quite close enough to a spy film? Well, I think you'll be quite happy that it got knocked out quite early on today.
Yeah, like Ian, you are summing up something that kept me awake many a times, where it was like, oh my god, like, do these count? I don't know. And it's something that when I started this show, I had a very narrow definition as to what a spy film was, because you kind of think, your Bonds, your Bournes, all the kind of the franchise stuff, some of the Hitchcock stuff. And it was kind of like this slow discovery of like, there's so many movies that edge into the spy genre, introducing elements. And I would say like Parallax View, you talk about like government or military involvement. And it's like, but what about a case like this where suddenly you have like espionage going on, sleeper cell agents being created? Suddenly it starts to like work into spy tropes, even though it's not necessarily telling a specifically spy story. So the answer is, I don't know. I think we just have to examine these on a case-by-case basis and probably within a review episode talk about, does this count? But if it seems like it kind of counts, we'll probably do it on the show and have the conversation at the end.
Absolutely. There was a film that we covered recently. I think it was Disney's Trench Coat, where I think during the viewing process, Cam and I texted each other and said, for a very long time during this, I did not think it was a spy film until maybe the last 5 or 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And we almost had to scrap a whole recording. So we are conscious of whether it's a spy film or not, and we do filter out films that we get a lot of recommendations online from people who say, hey, do this film, do that film. And we do filter a lot out. So I appreciate your hot take, Ian, and I appreciate your patronage on Patreon. Thank you.
Yeah, it's like I can think of one movie on the list we haven't tackled yet. It's an older film from like the 40s, I think, where you would not know for 95% of the movie that it's a spy film. And then it just reveals itself at the very end. And like those movies exist as well. So it's like, does that count? If for 95% of the movie you're sitting there going like, I don't know, like this is just some other type of movie. So we are going to have these conversations a lot in the future of SpyHards as well. So let's get to our last voicemail from Casey Fatchett, who's going to close us out. Casey?
All right, what is this we're recording? Who's this for? The SpyHards podcast. And why are we recording for the SpyHards podcast? 100 episodes. Who would listen to 100 episodes of SpyHards? Well, never mind. All right, let's do it. A warm and hearty congratulations to the SpyHards podcast for reaching 100 episodes. It's an incredible accomplishment, unlike Cam's no vote when it came to adding You Only Live Twice to the NOC list. But then again, I decided to do Never Say Never again, so mistakes were made, all is forgiven. Cheers to 100 episodes.
Was that Casey, or was that the big SC himself? Who knows?
No kidding. Throwing shade at me for You Only Live Twice. But you know what, Sean? I would do the same thing tomorrow.
I think you would. Thank you for the lovely message, Casey, or Sean, whoever you'd like to be known as. But we're still flabbergasted that we've lasted this long.
Yes, exactly. So look forward to more Bond hot takes in the future, I'm sure.
Absolutely. Well, we had a lot more messages. We couldn't get around to everyone's, but thank you for everyone that did send a message in. You're all stars to us. Now, this is part of our sort of spectacular for our 100th episode. We obviously had Spy Hard last week as a review, so we thought I'd do our namesake. This week we've obviously had our best of the best of the NOC list. Cam, I think we have one more episode to round out the celebration with.
Yes, well, Scott and I are going to be on vacation in Las Vegas, so we will not have a normal episode of SpyHards, but we have a Spy Master interview I think everyone is going to be very excited about. We are going to be talking to Mariam Dabo from The Living Daylights.
Yes, Mariam Dabo, aka Kara from The Living Daylights, is gracing us with her presence next week. Another big Bond name to have on the show, and I couldn't think of a better way of rounding out this 100 celebration than sharing our interview with you all. So your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to join us next week on the show and check out our Mariam Dabo Spy Master interview. If you like what you hear on SpyHards, please consider leaving us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts. And if you disagree or agree with our choices about the best of the best on the NOC list, let us know on social media, discreetly of course, at SpyHards, that's SpyHards on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. But for the 100th time, and hopefully many more, we'll see you among the shadows.